Imagine being dropped into the middle of nowhere. You'd probably prefer land over the ocean, right? It seems like every time we explore the sea depths, things get creepier. Throughout history, the ocean has always had scarier creatures than those on land. Some of the deadliest seas and oceans throughout history include the Jurassic waters with giant plesiosaurs, the Paleozoic oceans filled with giant cephalopods and sea scorpions, and the seas of the Cenozoic era, home to the massive megalodon shark. But none of these seas compare to a body of water that existed during the late Cretaceous period. It was home to terrifying beasts and may even trigger your thalassophobia. This place was the Western Interior Seaway, or, as some call it, Hell's Aquarium. Oceanography. You might not have heard of the Western Interior Seaway, but if you live in the United States, Mexico, or Canada, you've probably walked across where it once existed. The Western Interior Seaway was a massive inland sea that split North America in half during the Cretaceous period. This seaway existed for about 34 million years, from the early Cretaceous period around 100 million years ago to about 66 million years ago. It reached its peak during the Campanian age of the late Cretaceous, about 83.6 to 72.1 million years ago. Back then, it was a warm tropical sea, stretching about 600 miles wide at its broadest point and over 2,000 miles long. Despite its vast size, it was relatively shallow, averaging around 150 feet deep and reaching up to 3,000 feet at its deepest point. But even then, the seaway was home to countless sea monsters. These creatures were often bigger and scarier than the predatory dinosaurs on land. Sea monsters. The most famous and terrifying of the sea monsters in the Western Interior Seaway were the Mosasaurs. These huge sea monsters lived in the Western Interior Seaway and were a lot like giant lizards. But instead of legs, they had flippers, and their bodies were long and sleek, perfect for fast swimming. Depending on the species, some swam like eels, wiggling their bodies, while others swam like sharks, using their big tail fins to move quickly. Mosasaurs were the top predators in their time, with big, sharp teeth, perfect for tearing apart their prey. There were many different types of mosasaurs, and in the Western Interior Seaway alone, more than 10 different species lived at the same time. They ranged in size from about 6.5 feet to a massive 59 feet long. 3 of the most common mosasaurs you might run into were Cladastes, Platycarpus, and Tylosaurus. Cladastes was the smallest, but still pretty big, growing up to 20 feet long. It was slim and quick, hunting fish and other small animals in shallow waters. While it wasn't a huge threat to human-sized creatures, its bite would still be nasty, and it could even go into freshwater areas. The Platycarpus was a bit bigger, reaching up to 24 feet long and weighing about a ton. Even though it was larger, it wasn't as dangerous to bigger animals. Its teeth were pretty delicate, which means it probably ate smaller fish and squid in deeper waters. Now, the Tylosaurus was the real nightmare. This giant could grow between 39 and 52 feet long, about the size of a humpback whale. It had thick, serrated teeth that were great for ripping through large prey. As the top predator, Tylosaurus hunted a wide variety of animals, including other marine reptiles, turtles, birds, fish, sharks, and even other mosasaurs. Another giant in the Hell's Aquarium was the Mosasaurus. It could grow up to 56 feet long and weigh over 10 tons. Its bite was incredibly powerful, with teeth designed for slicing through flesh. With a bite force 4 times stronger than a saltwater crocodile, the Mosasaurus could easily take down its prey. And like the Tylosaurus, it had a great vision for hunting in murky waters. But even though the Mosasaurs were the biggest predators in the Western Interior Seaway, they didn't have the deadliest jaws. That title goes to a different creature that lived along the edges of the seaway, the Dinosuchus. Fossils of this sea monster, Dinosuchus, have been found on both sides of the seaway. On the eastern side, they were smaller but more common. On the western side, they were smaller but much larger, growing up to 39 feet long. While not as long as the biggest mosasaurs, the Dinosuchus was much heavier, weighing up to 8.5 tons. One of the coolest things about the Deinosuchus was its thick, heavy armor. Its back was covered in big, round, bony plates called osteoderms. These plates provided strong protection and helped it move around on land. When scientists first found these plates, they thought they belonged to a different kind of dinosaur. But what made the Deinosuchus truly terrifying was its bite. It had a huge, broad skull similar to an alligator's, which gave it an incredibly powerful bite. With strong jaw muscles, it could deliver a bite force stronger than a T-Rex's, estimated at over 100,000 newtons. Like today's alligators, the Deinosuchus probably ate anything it could catch. Still, fossils show it loved munching on marine turtles, large fish, and even dinosaurs that got too close to the water. The coasts and shallow reefs. So, we've talked about how terrifying the deep waters were, but the open waters weren't safe either. They had their own terrifying creatures, including some really strange cephalopods. Just like today's squids and octopuses, cephalopods were found in shallow waters, but also went into deeper areas. They weren't as big or as deadly as the Mosasaurs or Deinosuchus, but they were still impressive predators. Some were as big as today's colossal and giant squids. Two well-known cephalopods from that time were Tusateuthis and Ankateuthis. These creatures looked like short, thick squids, but were more closely related to modern octopuses. When they were young, they were small and easy prey for many marine animals, but they grew quickly and varied greatly in size. Some were as small as your arm, while others could reach up to 10 feet long. At this size, they became active predators, hunting fish, invertebrates, and even young mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. Tusateuthis and Ankateuthis had 10 tentacles lined with suckers to catch prey, which they then brought to their beaks to eat. They could likely squirt ink to escape predators and used jet propulsion to move quickly through the water. There was another cephalopod in these waters that had a solution to the lack of armor: Parapuzosia. Unlike Tusateuthis and Ankateuthis, Parapuzosia was an animite, a group of cephalopods with spiral shells made of calcium carbonate, like snail shells. These shells offered strong protection and housed most of their bodies. Parapuzosia was the largest known ammonite and the heaviest cephalopod ever, even bigger than the giant and colossal squids. The largest Parapuzosia shells were about 11 feet in diameter, and the creatures could weigh over 1.5 tons. If you could uncurl its body, it could reach up to 60 feet long, about twice the length of a whale shark. Despite their size, what Parapuzosia did with it remains a mystery. All ammonites are extinct, so we can only make a guess. They probably stayed in the upper layers of the water, not going deeper than 800 feet. Unlike today's giant squids, Parapuzosia wasn't hard to find and might have been capable of catching fish, other cephalopods, and even marine reptiles. But some think they might have been more likely to scare you than to eat you, possibly feeding on vegetation and plankton or hunting only the slowest creatures. But the terrifying Mosasaurs and the monstrous Deinosuchus weren't the only creatures that roam the Western Interior Seaway. Sharks of the Seaway. These ancient waters were home to some seriously scary sharks. One of the giants was Cretaceous, also known as the Ginsu Shark. Picture a shark as big as a school bus, around 26 feet long and weighing over 50 tons. It looked a lot like a great white shark and had a similar lifestyle, even though they weren't closely related. This shark was super fast, with a special type of tail fin that helped it move quickly through the water, possibly reaching speeds of up to 43 miles per hour. Its jaws were lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth, bigger and tougher than those of a great white. Then there was Squala Korax, also known as the crow shark. This shark was smaller than the Ginsu shark, usually measuring between 6 to 16 feet long. Don't be fooled by its smaller size. It was extremely dangerous. Its teeth were small, curved, and serrated, perfect for cutting through tough tissue. And it hunted pterosaurs, the flying reptiles of the time. Another fascinating shark from this time was Dinosuchus, also known as the shell-crushing shark. This shark was about the size of a whale shark, but had a different diet. Instead of filtering plankton, Dinosuchus used its flat, plate-like teeth to crush and eat shelled animals like crustaceans and turtles. Its teeth were numerous, sometimes numbering over 500, and could grow to be longer than a ruler. But there's another creature that deserves the spotlight. Monster hunters of the ancient seas. The Siphacinus, also known as the Xfish, was a real monster, and it definitely lived up to its reputation. The Xfish was part of a non-extinct group called Ichthyodectiformes, known for having some of the ugliest and meanest fish ever. And the Xfish might just be the ugliest and meanest of them all. So what made the Xfish so terrifying? It was its face. This fish had a broad, slanted jaw that looked like it was designed to scare. But it wasn't just for show. The jaw was super flexible, meaning the Xfish could swallow anything small enough to fit in its mouth. And with adults growing up to 16 to 20 feet long, that included a lot of prey. Imagine a fish so big it could swallow something human-sized in one gulp. That's exactly what the Xfish could do. There's even a famous fossil showing a 6.2-foot-long fish inside the stomach of a medium-sized Xfish. And that's not a one-time thing. There are over a dozen fossils showing similar scenes. The Xfish didn't just rely on swallowing prey whole. It had sharp, narrow teeth that could cut through flesh easily. This allowed it to scavenge large animals or chop up living ones into bite-sized pieces. So, against all odds, if you ever decide to take a swim in the Hell's Aquarium, this would be the last fish you'd want to meet. And with the Xfish, we've almost reached the end of the list of sea monsters that made the Western Interior Seaway a real Hell's Aquarium. But we can't forget one more iconic group, the Plesiosaurs. These fascinating creatures, like the Mosasaurs, had 4 flippers, but that's where the similarities ended. Plesiosaurs had broad, flat bodies and short, weak tails. Some had comically long necks, giving them the longest neck-to-body ratio of any reptile. They flapped their flippers in a way that looked like they were flying through the water and mostly stayed in shallower areas. Multiple types of plesiosaurs lived in the Western Interior Seaway, with most being true plesiosaurs, while a few species were pliosaurids. Some plesiosaurs could get quite large, typically over 15 feet long. The largest were Elasmosaurus and Albertonectes, which both grew to about 38 feet. Elasmosaurus had the most vertebrae of any known animal. Quite an accomplishment. Despite their size, plesiosaurs weren't the fiercest predators. They had narrow mouths and long necks, making them specialized for hunting small prey. They likely used their long necks to sneak up on small fish, hiding their large bodies out of sight and surprising their prey. Their teeth were angled to create a natural trap once they closed their mouths, making it hard for fish to escape. Apart from fish, they probably only ate snails, clams, and other small creatures. The Western Interior Seaway really was a place filled with some of the most interesting and fearsome creatures of all time. Where did all the sea monsters go? This brings up a question. Where did all these sea monsters and other crazy animals that called these waters home go? Some of them had a slow decline, while others evolved into different creatures. But the big game changer was that the Western Interior Seaway was constantly shrinking. The real end came with the asteroid that slammed into the Earth 66 million years ago. The asteroid collision was a massive event that caused extreme disruption and damage. It hit the Earth with such force that it created a huge crater and sent shockwaves around the world. The impact size was near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, which was very close to the Western Interior Seaway. This meant the Seaway got hit particularly hard. The asteroid impact sent a giant tsunami crashing through the Seaway, along with debris and other disasters. Imagine a wave so huge it wiped out everything in its path. On top of that, the impact kicked up dust and particles, blocking sunlight and causing temperatures to drop. This impact winter made it hard for many animals to survive. Fish fossils from this time have been found with indium in their gills, a metal that's rare on Earth but common in asteroids. This shows just how far the impact's effects reached. This devastation wiped out many of the iconic sea monsters and finally brought an end to Hell's Aquarium. Thanks for diving into the ancient seas with us. If you enjoyed learning about these terrifying sea monsters, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content.